If you're Irish with dark hair, dark eyes, and olive skin, you've probably heard the legend. Your ancestors were Spanish sailors, survivors of the Spanish Armada, shipwrecked off the Irish coast in 1588. They settled, they married Irish women, and they passed down their dark Mediterranean features. It's a romantic story, it's been passed down through generations, and according to DNA evidence, it's almost completely false. The truth about the Black Irish is far more ancient, far more surprising, and far more Irish than anyone expected. Recent genetic studies have revealed something shocking. The dark features that define the Black Irish don't come from Spanish sailors at all. They come from the very first people who settled Ireland, 5,000 years ago. This is the story of how DNA evidence shattered a centuries-old myth and revealed the true origins of Ireland's most mysterious population. This is the Black Irish DNA mystery. Let's start with the basics. What are the Black Irish? The term refers to Irish people with a distinct set of physical features. Dark brown or black hair, dark eyes, usually brown or hazel, sometimes olive or slightly darker skin tone. They stand in stark contrast to the stereotypical Irish appearance. You know the image. Red or auburn hair, fair skin, blue or green eyes, freckles. But travel through Ireland, particularly the west coast, and you'll see something different. In counties like Galway, Mayo and Kerry, you'll find entire families with Mediterranean features. Dark-haired, dark-eyed, looking more Spanish or Italian than stereotypically Irish. And for centuries, Irish families have explained this with the same story. The Spanish Armada. It's become so embedded in Irish-American culture that millions of people claim Black Irish heritage. They trace their dark features to Spanish sailors. It's part of their identity. But here's the problem. The Spanish Armada story has always been more legend than history. And now, DNA evidence has proven it conclusively. The Black Irish are not Spanish. They're not Mediterranean invaders. They're something far more ancient. But before we reveal the truth, we need to understand why the Spanish Armada myth became so powerful in the first place. Because like all good legends, it contains just enough historical truth to seem plausible. The year is 1588. King Philip II of Spain has assembled the largest naval fleet ever seen, the Spanish Armada, 130 ships, 30,000 men. Their mission? Invade England, overthrow Queen Elizabeth I, restore Catholic rule to Britain. It's an ambitious plan, and it fails spectacularly. The English navy harasses them in the English Channel, storms scatter the fleet, and the Armada is forced to retreat. But they can't sail back through the Channel, the English control it, so they take the long route home, north around Scotland, then south along the western coast of Ireland, and that's when disaster strikes. Fierce Atlantic storms slam into the already damaged fleet. Ship after ship is wrecked along the Irish coast. At least 24 Spanish ships are destroyed. Thousands of sailors drown. Thousands more wash ashore. And here's where the legend begins. According to the story, these Spanish survivors settled in Ireland. They married Irish women. Their children inherited Spanish features. Dark hair, dark eyes, Mediterranean skin. Over generations, these Spanish bloodlines spread, creating pockets of dark-featured Irish families, the Black Irish. It's a compelling story, and there's historical evidence to support parts of it. We know Spanish ships wrecked off Ireland, we know survivors made it to shore, we have records of Spanish sailors being found by Irish locals, but here's what the legend doesn't mention. Most of those survivors were killed. The English controlled Ireland at the time. They ordered the execution of any Spanish sailors found alive, and they paid Irish locals to hunt them down. Thousands were massacred, hundreds more died of exposure and starvation. The few survivors who weren't killed, most were ransomed back to Spain or imprisoned. The historical record shows that almost no Spanish Armada sailors stayed in Ireland long enough to have families. A handful, maybe, but not enough to create a distinct genetic population. So how did this myth become so widespread? Part of it is romanticism. Irish people, especially Irish Catholics, identified with Spain. Both were Catholic nations resisting English Protestant rule. The idea of Spanish-Irish unity was appealing, politically, culturally, emotionally, but the bigger reason is simpler. People needed an explanation for the black Irish, dark features that didn't fit the stereotypical Irish appearance. If they weren't naturally Irish, they must have come from somewhere else. Spain seemed like the perfect answer, and for centuries no one could prove otherwise, until DNA testing changed everything. In the early 2000s, something revolutionary happened. Genetic testing became widely available. Scientists could analyze DNA from modern populations, compare it to ancient DNA from archaeological sites, and trace ancestry back thousands of years. Ireland became a major focus for these studies. Researchers wanted to answer fundamental questions. Where did the Irish come from? Who were the original inhabitants? How did different populations mix over time? And they found something unexpected. When scientists tested modern Irish DNA, they found very little Spanish genetic markers. If the Spanish Armada story were true, there should be clear evidence. Haplogroups common in Spain should appear in Irish populations, especially along the western coast. But they don't. Spanish Y DNA haplogroups like R1b-DF27, common in Iberia, are extremely rare in Ireland. The genetic signature of Spanish ancestry? It's essentially absent. This shocked researchers, and it shocked the Irish-American community. Millions of people had been told they were part Spanish. Family stories passed down for generations, and DNA was proving it wrong. But here's where it gets interesting. While modern Spanish DNA wasn't showing up, researchers found something else. Ancient Iberian DNA. Not from 1588, from 5,000 years ago. And that changed everything, because it revealed the true origin of the Black Irish. A story far more ancient than anyone imagined. Let's go back, way back, to the Neolithic period, around 3000 BCE. Ireland at this time is sparsely populated. The people living there are Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, descendants of the first humans who arrived after the Ice Age. They have light skin, blue eyes, dark hair. They hunt, they fish, they live in small nomadic groups. And then something changes. New people arrive from the south. They come from the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain and Portugal. They're farmers. They bring agriculture, domesticated animals, and new technologies. They build megalithic tombs, stone structures that still stand today. And they have different physical features. Darker skin, dark hair, dark eyes. They look Mediterranean because they are Mediterranean. These are the Neolithic farmers, and DNA evidence proves they didn't just visit Ireland, they settled there, in massive numbers. Modern genetic studies show that these Iberian farmers replaced most of the earlier hunter-gatherer population. It wasn't violent conquest, it was gradual demographic replacement. The farmers had more food, more children, more stable communities. Over centuries, the Neolithic farmers became the dominant population in Ireland. And here's the critical point. When scientists analysed DNA from ancient Irish skeletons from this period, they find Iberian genetic markers, haplogroups that originated in Spain and Portugal, mitochondrial DNA showing maternal lineages from Iberia, Y-DNA showing paternal lineages from the same region. The ancient Irish were genetically Iberian. And those genetic markers, they're still present in modern Irish populations, especially in the West. Counties like Galway, Mayo and Kerry show the highest concentrations of these ancient Iberian markers. The same regions where Black Irish features are most common. This is the revelation that DNA testing provided. The Black Irish aren't descended from Spanish Armada sailors. They're descended from the original Neolithic inhabitants of Ireland, people who migrated from Iberia 5,000 years ago. The dark hair, the dark eyes, the olive skin, these aren't foreign features introduced by invaders. They're ancient Irish features, passed down from the very first agricultural societies in Ireland. The Black Irish are, genetically speaking, among the most Irish people there are. But there's more to the story, because after the Neolithic farmers came more waves of migration: Bronze Age cultures, Iron Age Celts, Vikings, Normans. Each left their genetic mark, and some contributed to the Black Irish phenotype in their own way. Let's talk about what happened after the Neolithic period. Around 2000 BCE, a new population arrived in Ireland, the Beaker people, named after their distinctive pottery. They brought bronze working technology, new burial practices, and new genes. DNA studies show they had a massive impact. They introduced haplogroups from the Eurasian steppe, R1b-L21, the most common Irish Y-DNA haplogroup today, comes from this period. But here's the thing, the Beaker people didn't erase the Neolithic population, they mixed with them. The ancient Iberian genetic markers survived, combined with new steppe ancestry, creating the genetic foundation of the Irish people. Then came the Celts, Iron Age cultures that spread across Europe around 500 BCE. The Celts brought new languages, new art styles, new social structures. But genetically, they didn't replace the existing population. Modern DNA studies show that Celtic migration was more cultural than genetic. The Irish adopted Celtic language and culture, but their DNA remained largely unchanged. And then came the Vikings. Starting in the late 700s, Norse raiders attacked Ireland. Eventually, they established settlements: Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Waterford. The Vikings mixed with the Irish population, and here's where it gets interesting for the Black Irish story. Not all Vikings were blonde and blue-eyed. Archaeological evidence and historical records show that many Norse warriors had dark hair. DNA studies of Viking Age skeletons reveal genetic diversity. Some had dark features inherited from earlier European populations. When these dark-haired Vikings mixed with dark-haired Irish descendants of Neolithic Iberians, they reinforced the Black Irish phenotype. Then came the Normans. In 1169, Norman lords, originally Vikings who had settled in France, invaded Ireland. They conquered large territories, established Norman Irish families, and they too had genetic diversity. Some Normans had dark features. When they married into Irish families, particularly in the southeast, they contributed to the gene pool. But here's the critical point. None of these later migrations created the Black Irish. They reinforced it, they added to it, but the foundation was already there. The Neolithic Iberian farmers, 5,000 years ago, that's the primary source of Black Irish features. Everything else is secondary. So what does Black Irish DNA actually look like today? If you take a DNA test and you have Black Irish ancestry, what will you see? Let's break it down. First, your ethnicity estimate will show mostly Irish and Scottish. That's standard. DNA testing companies group Britain and Ireland together genetically. You might see a small percentage of Scandinavian. That's Viking ancestry. Common in Irish populations, especially in coastal areas. You might see trace amounts of French or German. That could be Norman or earlier Celtic migration. But here's what you probably won't see. Spanish or Portuguese. Unless you have recent Spanish ancestry, like a grandparent or great-grandparent, modern DNA tests won't show Iberian heritage. Why? Because the Neolithic Iberian migration was 5,000 years ago. Testing companies can't distinguish between ancient Iberian markers and general Western European DNA. It all gets lumped together. But there are ways to see the deeper ancestry, haplogroups. These are genetic lineages that trace back thousands of years. If you test your Y-DNA, which traces the paternal line, you might see haplogroups like R1bl21. This is the most common Irish male lineage. It came from the Bronze Age Beaker people. But deeper analysis can reveal older markers, haplogroups that trace back to Neolithic Iberia. If you test mitochondrial DNA, which traces the maternal line, you might see haplogroups like HJ or U. These are common in both Ireland and ancient Iberian populations. Some genetic genealogy companies offer ancient ancestry analysis. They compare your DNA to ancient samples. If you have Black Irish ancestry, you'll likely show strong matches to Neolithic farmer samples from Ireland and Britain, and those samples will show Iberian origin. There are also regional differences within Ireland. The west coast shows the strongest ancient Iberian markers: Galway, Mayo, Kerry, Donegal. The east coast shows more Bronze Age and Viking influence. The Black Irish phenotype is most common in the west, where the Neolithic Iberian genetic legacy is strongest. So, how do you know if you're Black Irish? The easiest way is physical features. If you have Irish ancestry and dark hair, dark eyes, you might be. But genetics is more complex than appearance. Not everyone with Neolithic Iberian ancestry has dark features, and not everyone with dark features has that specific ancestry. If you want to know for certain, DNA testing is the way. Why DNA will trace your direct paternal line? Mitochondrial DNA will trace your direct maternal line. Look for haplogroups common in Neolithic populations. Your results will show ancient origin points. And here's the beautiful part. If you do have Black Irish ancestry, you're carrying genetic markers from the very first agricultural people in Ireland. You're descended from the farmers who built Newgrange, who created the megalithic tombs, who transformed Ireland from a land of hunters to a land of settlements. The Spanish Armada story, it's romantic, it's dramatic, but it's not true. The real story is even better. The Black Irish are genetically ancient, descended from people who arrived 5,000 years ago, from Iberia, with dark features that they passed down through 150 generations. Those features didn't come from foreign invaders. They're not signs of conquest or tragedy. They're signs of ancestry, deep, ancient Irish ancestry. The Black Irish are the genetic heirs of Ireland's original farmers, and that's a story worth celebrating. If you've enjoyed this video, subscribe for more.